We'll talk a bit about what's going on in the current economy. Certainly a historic moment. Inflation saw a better report here this morning, which is encouraging. Still a long ways to go. Combating inflation, as we've seen the Fed has done in the last couple of years, they had no choice but to raise interest rates in an attempt to counteract what was happening. We talked at length in several committees. It was kind of a blue jersey, red jersey exercise before some of these massive spending bills were passed here in Washington. This would be a potential inflation risk, and the chickens did come home to roost. Is that my feedback there? So on top of that, we saw the bank failures earlier this year. I believe in large part due to regulators being asleep at the switch, as we probed in great depth in many of these failures. It's clear these failures were not due to insufficient capital. Nevertheless, you're moving forward with a flawed Basel III endgame proposal. This proposal will limit credit availability to small businesses. I'm hearing it in both ears from our businesses back home across Montana. We had 4 Montana small business owners in the office here this morning who flew in to express their frustration with this regulation. Look, we're from a state that is a small business state. We are not the land of massive C-corps. We're the land of small businesses. In fact, 99% of our businesses are small business. I think we have one of the highest percentages of small business in the nation. And when they take a hit, they have to pass these increased costs on to consumers or they go under. So we're looking at higher inflation or loss of jobs, which is two very difficult outcomes. I'm happy to have joined nearly 40 Republican senators, including every Republican member of this committee, urging this proposal to be withdrawn. Vice Chair Barr, if banks are required to keep even more money on the sidelines, as this proposal requires, that's going to have a direct impact on business across my state. We're hearing it from our banks. Additionally, and by the way, these aren't the GSIBs. We're hearing it from the smaller banks. Additionally, the public listing requirements will further exacerbate the problem, as most small businesses are not publicly traded companies. They don't have massive compliance departments. Other jurisdictions, such as the EU and the UK, have seen the negative consequences firsthand, and they've dropped the public listing requirements. Has there been any cost-benefit analysis for this? And why are you continuing to push something that has already been proven to be so detrimental? Vice Chair Barr.
Thank you, Senator. First of all, let me just say we take these concerns seriously. We want a capital rule that works for small businesses. We want a capital rule that works all over the country for different kinds of communities. We don't anticipate that this current rule will have adverse effects on small businesses based on the analysis. Very small part of the rule actually affects credit. Most of it is about trading and derivative activities. But we do pay attention to these issues. We appreciate the comments. If we can improve the rule, such as you suggested with respect to the listing requirement, we will do that. Under the rule, for the first time, small businesses...
Mr. Chairman, thanks for that. So you will do that, or you'll look at doing that?
We'll have to review the comments.
Okay, I heard you say you will do that. Okay, all right.
We're in a public comment period.
Okay.
If it turns out that the comments show that we should make changes to the rule based on small business input, we will do that. Okay. So I need to, of course, be completely open and am completely open to hearing those comments. I won't prejudge the outcome of those comments.
I wonder how many small businesses are cheering this on right now. I'd be curious if you kind of looked at the, poll the audience here. I can't imagine too many small businesses say this is a great idea.
As I've said, Senator, in response to other questions, this rule only affects the largest 37 banks in the country. It doesn't affect any banks in Montana. It doesn't affect any community banks. The small business provisions in the rule actually provide more flexibility for a lower risk weight than is currently under the law. Right now, our current rules have a 100% risk weight for small businesses. Under this proposal, which is more risk sensitive, small businesses can actually have a lower risk weight. That means banks hold less capital against them than they do now.
It's getting harder and harder. So I'll say for our banks back home, having spent most of my career not in a suit and tie here, but as part of small businesses, it's getting harder and harder to get capital at the moment. It just is. And this is a real concern about when they look for alternatives to find capital. They can't get it with local banks. This becomes a real issue for business to keep growing here, and I've heard it again very clearly, articulated well. from my small businesses. Last question, I know I'm out of time. You yourself have said many times the U.S. financial system is strong and well capitalized. In fact, that's the consensus from everyone in this panel today. Chair Powell has rightly stressed that the Fed is and should be a consensus organization. However, it appears that despite wide disagreement on the scope of the proposal, you're determined to see through, regardless of the impact this will have on the financial system, which I might add hasn't even been sufficiently studied, given the lack of consensus. You might hopefully you would try to get consensus, but this is turning into a very, very partisan kind of outcome, and it's dividing versus uniting. Are you going to be substantially altering or resubmitting the Basel III proposal to better reflect the concerns of other members of the board in the spirit of trying to get consensus?
Thank you, Senator Daines. As I've said previously, I am a big believer in trying to reach broad consensus on the board. I don't know that we can get unanimity on every rule, but broad consensus. Of the 50 rules or supervisory actions that have come up since I've been at the board, of those 50, almost all of them have been unanimous decisions. So I do very much value that, but it's an issue that I'll continue to work on.
Chairman, thank you.